Eric and myself have been running the VS Code team for around 8 years together, co-lead. So we will give you a glimpse behind the scenes here, because we actually think that the way we develop VS Code really is part of the secret sauce of why it is so successful. So let me kick off with our team. So we started very, very small. Right now we have a quite notable team, so 51 people with 2 hubs, one in Zurich, Switzerland, and the other one in Redmond in the United States. That's close to Seattle. And we have, a few little satellite offices around the world. And Eric.
Yeah, now the team, what do we ship, right? That's the topic of the talk. You all know once a month we ship a release, but there is much more. And I must tell you, I'm always impressed when I see what the team ships, right? So we do this stable release, then we do recovery releases for quality with hand-picked fixes. We do insider releases, which the team uses ourselves at least daily. If something breaks, of course, we do another one because that's the build we're using. And also we ship security releases, which have a separate process when we do it, but this is also kind of overhead that you have to address. We not only ship the desktop, we also ship VS Code for the web, VS Code Dev. I hope you've all tried that out by now. And what's interesting here, a survival skill we have, right? How do we survive shipping something for the web and on the desktop is that we share as much code as possible between these different platforms and the architecture, right? So that's really code reuse to the maximum. That's our goal is, and which also requires investment. But it's more than that. We also own several of the extensions that you love and use, hopefully, like the remote extensions, Python, GitHub pull request, Jupyter, ESLints, they're owned by our team. A survival skill here is that we use a very standardized process for how to deploy these extensions so that not everyone has to invent that, right? It's very standardized. But also there is more than that, right? Not only extensions, actually node modules that haven't mentioned here, but we have also protocols, specifications. We invented them, language server debug adapter protocols, which are used by other IDEs. And last but not least, the popular components like the Monaco edit and Extreme.js are developed and shipped by our team.
Good. So we have a lot of things that we actually do, and we will actually in the talk here also give you a whole bunch of little snippets of information. So it actually helps if you have somewhat like a compass to actually interpret, right, all of the pieces of information that we give them. And the first one is that the culture we actually live is actually also a product of the team itself. So everyone in the team has a responsibility that we put the user in the center of our decision-making processes, right? And that also every single person can call out and say if they are able to do their best work, if something is in their way, so that we can actually move it out of their way and so on. And we actually think that this really makes a difference, right? And that it results in the product that people like. There is also a technical component that is good to understand from the get-go, which is that you can actually spend a tremendous amount of time in making sure you never ever break anything, right? But sometimes you have to move extremely fast. You have to seize an opportunity that is out there. And so how can we do this? And we did this by actually fine-tuning pretty much our processes, the architecture, all of our tooling that we use for short lead times. What that means is if I'm creating and commit and make out of this commit a PR, then it takes us approximately 1.5 hours to produce a new build that all of you can have in your hands, right? And what that allows us is to take calculated risks.
Okay, we told you we ship monthly. I think shipping monthly sounds easy, but the challenge is you have to ship something at the end of the month, which has good quality and which has features which make our users happy and interested in trying the new release. So how do we do that? And that's a pattern we use also since many years. We break an iteration into 4 stages. Week 1 is 2 activities. Now the team leads work with the team members on the plan, on the iteration plan, what should be on there, what does the community want, what will make them happy. because the team members, they're in the front of everything. They know the issues, they hear the feedback. While the team leads work on the plans with the team members, the team doesn't sit idle. They work on debt reduction. Debt reduction means remove a workaround, or you adopt a new language feature, right? A good example was like adopting nullable types from TypeScript. This took us multiple debt weeks to do that. And also as part of debt reduction, tool improvements, right? Whatever when we think the build becomes too slow, that's also the time when we invest in our engineering system to make the build faster again. Once you have the plan, of course, we can roll. And what's special there? We have daily stand-ups. Actually, we call them not stand-ups, it's more like sit-downs, because the goal is not to stand up and run away quickly. The goal is to sit down and have a deep conversation on your progress, right? And this includes a demo, and this includes discussing and getting feedback from others. Since about a year, as we switched to use the GitHub flow, that means we work in branches and make pull requests so that others review the changes. And of course, we have developed tools that make this flow very well suitable for us in VS Code. After these 2 weeks of development, then we switch to the end game. And the end game has really the goal, we want to get something shippable with quality that others can build on and use. And then we change roles during this week. First, we write test plan items, which is how do you test a new feature? We describe that. Then we have a day where everyone tests. This was Tuesday, yesterday, right? We're in the end game right now. Once everybody has tested, we start fixing. We trust the team to pick the fixes they think important, right? There is nothing like a ship room, whatever. The team is really mature enough to make the right decision. Once the fixes are done, we verify the fixes, right? These are smaller test cases when you reproduce a bug, and that's what we do there. Once we have verified fixes, we switch to a documenter role, right? We write release notes and we update the documentation because we ship every month. Everything has to be updated. That includes the documentation. Then, of course, after that, the next iteration starts, as you have seen before. What we do, once we are done with the end game the week after, we ship the release, and then we have typically 1 week later recovery builds with hand-picked, probably a handful of critical fixes. So that's our rhythm. And the thing is, we use this rhythm for over 10 years, right? And this is one practice that we really are kind of strict on. So when a new team joins us, that's the first thing we try to align, right? That we have all the same rhythm. We do this for 10 years. What you see here is basically the iteration plans from the previous month. An iteration plan is just an issue with a label iteration plan. In the issue, use Markdown and links to issues in the repository. And we embellish the thing with emojis to show the status, like a running man, this is work in progress, or a muscle, that's a stretch goal, things like that. And we do that since, more than 10 years. And you can see when you read this, each plan is a little piece of art, right? That a lot of love has gone into and a lot of sweating. And we like it so much that Monday after once you have done the plan, then everybody shares it and really read it together.
Good. So now that Eric actually told you what the basic layout of the iteration is, so, as you said, we have the plan after the first week. So, but how do we actually do that? What we execute on during the weeks 2 and 3 here really fits the mark, right? So it is actually what users want. How do we make sure that we are actually not regressing in quality, performance, and these kinds of things? And in order to make that happen, we have the insider build. The insider build is something that we create Monday to Friday, right? And every single day it has all of the latest changes in it, so that when you push the feature, for example, on Tuesday, right, then our 130,000 users out there who use insiders actually can use that feature right away. We also use our own team uses insiders channel for development. Right? That is important because we actually are developers. We're using our own tool, and we always use on the latest, right? So we can, by doing this, monitor, for example, as I said, stability, performance, how features really feel, and that is an important aspect to us. And we also can use the pre-release versions of all our different extensions, right? We can, however, the insider build install side by side with the stable release, and that is actually a feature, right? Again, think about this, how fast we actually want to move forward. So if things go wrong, and they can go wrong sometimes, then all of those 130,000 users would actually be blocked from using VS Code, right? But they can have the stable version installed just next to it, open the same folder, a couple of seconds later, right? They're actually good to go. So continuous feedback and dogfooding throughout the iteration. Then, as Eric already mentioned, right, how do we actually get from, creating insiders, then turning the insiders into the next stable build, right? And that is the end game. And he alluded already to it, that we pretty much change what the organization, our whole team, is all about. We're going from being a developer organization to being a tester organization. So everyone who created a feature, who made significant changes in VS Code, is creating something that we call a test plan item. So then we have something like 50 to 80 different test plan items, and the team as a whole now starts actually going through those test plan items, taking them as a starting point for exploratory testing. So quality is being tested, but also the overall feel of the feature. Ideas are collected of what that feature would enable in other parts of VS Code, and so on. And once we have done that, right, then we can move on. People who actually created test plan items are also responsible for writing the release notes, right? Their features should actually show up in release notes, and they are the ones who write it. They're also the ones who update the documentation. Like, they have help from someone in the team who is a professional writer, because not everyone's, is a good writer, but that is the basic layout. The end game, let's be honest, not everyone likes testing, right? So we have to make sure that the end game actually is really moving along in a good pace, and that is the responsibility of the end game champ. And everyone in the team is end game champ in a rotating role, and everyone kind of puts their personal profile on the end game. Like, here's an example, right? Tyler was our last end game champ, and he, for example, likes cruises very much. So he casted the whole end game as it would be a cruise with him as the cruise director.
So now that we've seen our engineering practices, let's stop a second, right? What you see, basically, our goal is, at the end of iteration, we have something of high quality. And then as we go forward, we keep this high quality, right? We don't want that the quality goes down and we have to climb up quality again. So what we do, of course, to keep a release good for users, we fix critical issues in recovery releases. We have that. It's not embarrassing, right? If you have a fix going in there, because it's also stress reduction. If you know, okay, if something's really critical happening, we can put in a recovery release, right? That really helps with attitude. Guys explained how we do dogfooding and insiders. What's interesting, we dogfood across all the platforms we have, desktop, web, and remote, across different operating systems. This gives us also the daily feedback on quality. Endgame week, just looked in detail how we make quality even better by testing and validation, bug verification. And last but not least, when we then start iteration, the first thing we do is we look back, how can we improve the architecture to keep our code in a good shape? And that's really true, and that's something I'm really proud of, right? Our code base is over 10 years old. I think even after 10 years, the code base is fit, that we can move forward in an agile way, be aggressive when it comes to changing and trying new things out. And also, key factor to quality is a good engineering system, right? The build turnaround time has to be fast, because the faster it is, the faster you get feedback, the more agile you get. That's why we invest into that.
So now you heard the structure of the iteration, and you heard how that structure actually helps us to create a quality product. But there is also a different dimension, almost orthogonal to what we have been talking about, which is actually collective product ownership, that also is supported by how we actually structure an iteration and the practices around it. Eric talked about how the planning week works. right? And I want to re-emphasize this. It is not that you, if you're a member of the team, that you're being told, here's what you have to do. What you do and what you show up on an iteration plan is the result of a very intense conversation. It is what you think you should work on, what you think other members in the team should work on, what you think the team as a whole should work on because of what you have perceived, for example, through GitHub issues or discussions or what happened on Twitter and so on, reconciled with our overall strategic direction, right? And that is a lot of discussion that is going on one-on-ones between the team leads and the team members, then among the team leads with the PM team and so on, right? That's why it really takes us a whole week really to get to a good outcome. Once we have the good outcome, right, then we do on Monday mornings, 8 a.m. Pacific, to the detriment of the Pacific time zone members, we do the plan reading. And again, that is a collective activity. So it's not that somebody tells the team, here is the plan. It is that every single person speaks to their own plan items. They explain to the rest of the team what they are working on. And that's important. That's accountability, but that also makes sure that I, as a team member, know who is working on something that is related, for example, to what I work on or what's important to me. Then between the development weeks and the beginning of the endgame week, we just go through updates on it. But then at the end, after the endgame is done and the release notes have been created, we actually use the plan meeting the Monday of the planning week to read the release notes. And that is almost like a collective celebration of what we do. And again, every single person talks to their own contributions here. Then we talked about already the stands up and sit downs, right? We have 2 of them in the major hubs. And one thing that we really encourage people to do is, no matter how rough it is, give a demo of your daily progress, because that enables the team to give feedback. Right? And honestly, for new team members, sometimes this is rough to learn, right? Because the team might actually take apart what you did. But overall, everyone learns that, having this intense feedback loop really establishes or allows us to create the best product. We only have self-organized working groups like the weekly UX meeting and the weekly API meeting, right? That also contribute to this. They're self-driven by the team members. Another aspect of co-ownership is actually sharing duties. We already talked about the endgame champ, but we have more of those roles. We have, for example, rotating roles for who is tracking social media, who is actually tracking our builds. Everyone is responsible to not break the build, but sometimes there's build breakage that is a little bit harder to pin down. So that's the build champion's role. And we used to have inbox tracking, which was a rotating role, but now we actually replace that with the bots. And if the bot doesn't know to who to assign the issue, then pretty much the bot sprays them among the team so that everyone has a little bit of inbox tracking every single day. Yet another dimension pretty much of ownership or collective product ownership is that, again, it's not just up to one particular team member or to the PM team or anyone to say, oh, here's a great idea, let's do it. What we actually try to do is we realize that a certain idea is worthwhile being investigated. And then what we did, we pretty much tap into the collective creativity and wisdom pretty much of our team and say, okay, let's spend 2 or 3 days together on something to really figure out what to do, right? Here, for example, we have a screenshot of the most recent of such activities, which was after the advent of ChatGPT, right? To saying, well, where are all the places where we can actually create or use AI in VS Code? And what would we actually do, right? And what is it that we need to learn and so on, right? So that was, for example, a quite successful hackathon we had.
So VS Code is also an open source project. And of course, like any open source project, we care about our community. In fact, you want to be very close to our community. We want to be actually so close that there's 0 distance between us as a development team and our community. So that's why I call it 0 distance. So how we achieve that, or we try to achieve it? First of all, we want to be as transparent as possible, right? So the plans we showed before, they're all public. We also have a roadmap, which is public, where we show the more 6 to 12 months plan. You see them on the right side. And the idea is once you're transparent, people see what we're up to, so they can help us on what we're up to, right? That's clear. Transparency is not sufficient. You have to listen to feedback, right? If you don't listen to feedback, people will stop giving you feedback. And we really watch for emotions. We watch for highly upvoted features. We participate in these discussions. We invite people also in meetings to try to resolve them. PRs continuously reviewed, and if they fit, they are accepted. And a very important feedback source is, of course, GitHub issues. We want to be very responsive to GitHub issues, despite the fact we got so many of them, right? And we just have the number here. Every month we get 2,000 to 3,000 issues, which are little love letters that we take care of, and we see them every day, and we try to be as responsive as possible. There is more to it, right? We have also social channels like Twitter, Stack Overflow, Slack channels for the extension author community, and we are responsive on them as well. And the way we do it, rotation is the magic here. So we care a lot about our community. And when you look at the last Octoverses with number of contributors, VS Code was always high up. We have many contributors, and we really care about them. And that's why also in our release notes, we really say thank you to our contributions, right? We say thank you to people that contribute and helped us with issue tracking. And of course, we say thank you to people that contributed pull requests to VS Code, pull requests to our extensions, to documentation, and so on, right? So that's just what we can give back the community for having given us something.
Mm-hmm. Good. So success comes with a price, right? Eric just gave a couple of numbers, like 2,000 to 3,000 issues during an iteration, right? And here on this screenshot, there are a couple of other numbers highlighted that give you a feel about the volume with which we actually deal. And clearly, you cannot do this all manually, right? We don't, for example, have a L1 support team or any of those things, right? Zero distance is the knowledge, or is the motto here. So we need to invest significantly into tools that help us staying afloat. One of them, I'm pretty sure all of you have seen, are our issue bots. We use them, for example, for standardized answers. We use them in order to close, for example, issues that do not get the responses in a certain time and so on. But we also use them, for example, to implement a flow where it is, example, it's really hard for us to verify a certain issue. So we actually ask the author, for example, of the issue to verify it. Maybe that person has a very special setup, right? And the bots actually allow us to implement that flow. And there's continuous investment in those bots to make them better. Also, we use, that is a smaller item here, but very successful for us. When we started developing notebooks, we also looked for other use cases of notebooks. And one of them we came up with was GitHub issue notebooks. And now when you actually go into the VS Code repo, you actually see that we share those notebooks that we actually use to run the endgame. So there is one that you as a member of the team, you can open, right? And then accordingly, all of the important queries that we use for the that we use to run the endgame are actually there, so that you actually can track accordingly. And then what we also do have is our built-in release tooling. Why is that important? Yeah, we actually create a massive amount of different artifacts for different platforms, right? And so, yeah, the artifacts are available in our build pipelines, and you could find them there and so on, but it's very cumbersome. So we actually give it this kind of more centralized view in our builds, and you see all of the different builds that actually succeeded and the artifacts that have been created, from what branch they came, and so on. But not only this, we actually also allow you to manage builds from there. So from that portal, you can go and, for example, release a build to the world so that all of you actually can see it. We can also unrelease builds, meaning we realize, for example, that there was a problem with the build, we can unrelease it, or we can freeze the rollout of a build so that, we're not rolling it back, but those people who already have it, but no new people actually get it, right? And that part here we have for all different versions of VS Code for insiders, stables, and then something that we call exploration that allows us when we adopt new Electron versions.
So given our mindset to automate as much as possible, right? We want to also try to automate as much as possible our other process elements, like who is in charge for doing something, who is the endgame master. For that, we have an internal website that helps us to track that. Who's currently the endgame champion? Who is the buddy? We typically do it across different sites, once in Redmond, once in Zurich. For the endgame, one challenge was that we have to create all these test plan items and we have to assign them to team members. Okay, can you go to the next one, please? Sorry. Yeah, so, and of course you can imagine we create these test plan items, they get assigned to team members. You want to have a fair balance and so on. And it's always a pain for the endgame champ to do that because how do you fare, how to keep track of it? So now we have also a tool for that helps us to assign those test plan items using algorithm to the different team members with the goal of a fair balance, which takes into account the different complexity of the test plan items. That shows our mindset, automate as much as possible.
Yep. So that already brings us to the end here. And honestly, given all of the different things we do and the different, practices we developed over time, it's kind of hard to give a concise summary. But let me put it this way. If we wanted to have you one thing that you take away from all of this is that we try to really all align our processes and tools so that we can continuously ship quality and that we can continuously improve VS Code, right? That while we do this, we can do this in the speed and take calculated risks and have safety nets that actually help you that if things go wrong, we can pretty much recover very, very quickly, right? And then the next part of this one is that what we do and how we do it and that we ship quality is not really just up to the team leads or a leadership team in general or some random person. It is part of the team itself. Every single team member contributes to the culture, is responsible that we stick to our culture and that we ship quality. And that was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kai and Eric. It is always such a treat to be able to hear firsthand, get some insight into what the process is like on the VS Code team. So we do have a couple of questions. So first, we were wondering if you could talk a bit about how has the vision changed between when VS Code first started versus today?
Wow, that must go to Eric, because he started.
Well, it has changed, but as you saw, basically we do monthly shipment, right? So we basically tune since the beginning. Every month we replan. So it was a really incremental evolution of the product vision. Of course, you have expanded, right? Big thing, we added remote development because there was new challenges coming on. We added web because people want to develop from everywhere. But this was all done incrementally. And thanks to our fit code base, we can really do that and go in different directions and explore things. And now the next big wave will happen when it comes to AI.
That's awesome. And then I think we have a couple more audience questions that we can turn to. Dawn, do you want to give some of your thoughts on what that keynote was like? I think it's so exciting to be able to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, they covered a lot of what we do in our day-to-day. We didn't have a sneak preview of the keynote, and I'm really excited that we were able to get into the triaging and some of our automation tools, even went into endgame. So I really feel like the audience was able to get an in-depth view of what we get to talk about in our meetings.
Absolutely, yes. And one other question we were wondering if you could talk a bit about how the team actually picks what features to work on from the community.
Yeah, that's a very good one. Because there is not a single answer. Let me put it this way, right? It really depends on how many people are actually impacted by the feature, what are synergies between this feature, the existing features, or other features that we plan in the future, right? Is it pretty much an on-ramp for something, and so on? So all of those considerations fit into this, but what clearly is guiding us here is, for example, the number of upvotes on an issue, but also the sentiment analysis of an issue, right? We have some issues that, for example, are extremely emotional, even if it's just only a certain subset of people, right? Fairness considerations also play into this. Like, for example, right, we do a big deal, you will hear this, if I'm correct, later in the day, about accessibility. Right, we want to make sure that, for example, blind developers get equal attention to non-blind developers, right? But the numbers are different, right? One is outweighing the other. So all of these kinds of things really come together, right? Technical difficulty, how hard is it to implement, the costs, all of these kinds of things. So yeah, it's sometimes I feel a little bit more like art than it is, a quite rational decision-making process.
I love that analogy.
We can incrementally steer, right? Every month we can make a new decision and adjust. If we miss something, and we see, we can tune, right? So it's continuous steering. That's our process also.
I love that. Thank you so much for giving that insight. We are so glad that you were able to do our keynote and set the stage for this event. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.